All right, so we're diving deep today into mindful acceptance.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it's from this article I found called A Guide to Mindful Acceptance, and it's from the Continuous Improvement blog.
I see.
And basically it's like it flips the script on how we deal with like anxiety and cravings and stuff.
Okay.
And it asks this question, what if instead of like fighting all those feelings, all those negative feelings, what if we just accepted them?
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the article starts off talking about how a lot of those like classic anxiety management techniques,
Right.
they often backfire.
Yeah.
Like if you try to just distract yourself or argue with your negative thoughts, it can actually make things worse.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're trying to force yourself to be positive, but then it just makes it worse.
Right.
Yeah, and I always think about that, like, don't think of a pink elephant thing.
Yes.
Like, the more you try not to think about it, the more you're just, like, focused on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Oh, yeah.
You can try to push it down for a little bit, but eventually it's going to pop back up,
Yeah.
probably with even more force.
Yeah.
So this new approach is called mindful acceptance in the article.
Okay.
Can you explain a little about that?
Yeah, so basically they're saying it's all about, like, shifting your perspective.
Okay.
Instead of battling it out with your emotions, you just observe them,
Right.
but you do it without judgment.
Oh, okay.
So they have this analogy. They say, imagine you're watching clouds just drift by. You can acknowledge that they're there, but you're not like, you don't need to get all caught up in trying to change them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, like when I first read that, I was a little skeptical.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like giving up,
I can see that.
But like the more I read about the author's personal experiences, it really started to change my mind.
Right. And there's actually some research behind this.
Right.
Mindful acceptance, it's really rooted in mindfulness practices,
Mm-hmm.
which have been studied quite a bit.
Yeah.
And they showed some pretty amazing benefits.
Okay.
So by simply acknowledging and accepting our feelings, we can actually reduce their intensity.
Really?
It's like we create space between ourselves and the emotions so they don't just completely overwhelm us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how does this actually play out, like in the real world?
Well, the author talks about their own anxiety around like social situations,
Okay.
like those classic pre-party jitters and feeling awkward during the event.
Oh, yeah.
And then afterwards, like this overthinking.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. But instead of trying to fight those feelings, they started practicing this mindful acceptance.
Okay.
So they acknowledged the anxiety was there.
Mm-hmm.
They noticed the physical sensations, that come with it.
Right.
And they just focused on their breath.
It worked.
It did.
Yeah.
They found that by accepting the anxiety, it actually became less intense. Yeah. It's kind of mind-blowing, right?
That is. So what's going on there?
So there's some fascinating neuroscience behind this.
Okay.
When we resist negative emotions, we trigger what's called the amygdala,
Okay.
which is like our brain's alarm system.
Uh-huh.
So that kind of puts us into fight or flight mode.
Oh, good.
But when we practice acceptance, we're actually engaging the different part of the brain
Okay.
called the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And that helps us to regulate our emotions
Right.
and make more rational decisions.
So it's like going from like a total panic to
Yes.
more of a like thinking clearly.
Exactly.
Okay.
So by accepting our feelings, we're basically telling our brains to just chill out a bit.
I like that.
Yeah.
So then the article goes on to talk about how this whole mindful acceptance thing helped the author deal with grief.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So specifically, after visiting their grandfather in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
they were feeling all this guilt and sadness.
That's tough.
Yeah, but instead of like, trying to push those feelings away, they actually sought out this quiet place to just sit with them.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and they describe sitting on a bench,
Okay.
closing their eyes, and then visualizing those feelings as like dark clouds.
Wow.
And then those clouds are being like carried away by the wind.
That's beautiful imagery.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the power of mindfulness in processing those really tough emotions.
Right, but does that make you feel like you're just wallowing?
Well, it's not about ignoring or minimizing your feelings.
Okay.
It's about acknowledging them,
Okay.
allowing yourself to feel them fully, and then letting them go.
So it's like you're acknowledging that the storm's there,
Yes.
but you don't have to get like swept away by it.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like recognizing that emotions are temporary, just like those passing clouds.
Right.
They come, they might linger for a little while, and then they move on.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight them, cling to them, or even let them define you.
Okay, so now let's talk about cravings,
Okay.
because this is something I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
The author actually gets really honest about their struggles with binge watching TikTok.
Ah, the endless scroll.
Right.
Yes.
And they realized that focusing on like, I won't watch TikTok wasn't really working.
Right.
So they shifted their mindset to,
Interesting.
yeah, I want to do other things.
Okay.
Things that are more fulfilling in the long run, like reading or catching up with friends.
Right.
Or even just getting a good night's sleep.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's about focusing on what you want to do rather than like fighting that urge itself.
Right.
And I think we all have our own version of that TikTok trap.
Absolutely.
I know I get lost down like a Netflix rabbit hole pretty easily.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of psychology behind cravings.
Okay.
They're often tied to our reward system.
Oh, okay.
So, when we do certain things, our brain releases dopamine, which makes us feel good. But that good feeling can actually reinforce the craving.
Really?
Yeah, and make it even stronger.
Oh, wow.
So we have to retrain our brain to associate those good feelings with healthier behaviors.
So what was the author's secret, what they do?
They talk about a technique called urge surfing.
Urge surfing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically you ride the wave of the craving without it giving in.
Okay.
So they pay close attention to the physical sensations that come up.
Right.
Like restlessness or that feeling of being on edge.
So instead of just like diving headfirst into whatever you're craving,
Right.
you just take a moment to actually experience the feeling.
Exactly. And they describe it as like watching a waves building up.
Okay.
And, waves, they rise and fall, but they always eventually fade away.
Yeah.
So they would remind themselves that the urge to scroll, it would also pass,
Okay.
even if they didn't act on it right away.
That's a really good analogy.
It is. It's helpful.
Yeah, because then it's like a reminder that those cravings are temporary.
Yes, just like everything else.
Exactly.
But just by observing it without judgment, they could break that cycle of just mindlessly scrolling.
Right.
And then they could make more intentional choices about how they spent their time.
So instead of being controlled by the craving,
Right.
they're in control of their actions.
Exactly.
This is good stuff.
It is.
Yeah, it feels like this is, I don't know, a whole new way to deal with these everyday challenges.
Right.
And it's not just cravings.
No, absolutely not.
Like it's anxiety, stress, even those moments where you feel like I just want to snap at someone.
You're right.
Yeah.
It can be helpful for like a whole range of emotions.
So we're talking anger, sadness, frustration, the whole roller coaster.
All of it. The key is to approach those emotions with curiosity
Okay.
and compassion instead of resistance.
Yeah.
So acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to feel them without judgment and trust that they will pass.
I like that, but I feel like that's a big shift in thinking. Yeah, so how do you go from like resisting your feelings to actually embracing them?
That's where the mindful part of mindful acceptance comes in.
Okay.
It's about becoming more aware of what's happening inside yourself without trying to change it.
So it's almost like becoming an observer
Yes.
of your own like internal weather patterns.
I love that.
Yeah.
You can notice the storms,
Mm-hmm.
the calm, sunny days, everything in between.
Yeah.
And you don't get swept away by how intense it might feel in the moment.
That's a good way to put it.
And just like we can't control the weather,
Right.
we can't always control our emotions,
Yeah, that's true.
but we can learn to navigate them more skillfully
Right.
by practicing mindful acceptance.
All right, so it sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that it takes practice, right?
Absolutely. It's a skill.
Yeah.
It develops over time with consistent practice.
Okay.
Like learning an instrument or training for a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
It takes patience, persistence,
Yeah.
and a willingness to be kind to yourself along the way.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about achieving some kind of perfect state.
Right.
It's about learning to relate to your emotions in a more healthy way.
So if someone's listening right now
Yeah.
and they're thinking, okay, I want to try this,
Yeah.
where do they even begin?
Well, I think the author's suggestion of a mini experiment is a great place to start.
Okay, tell me more.
So the next time you feel anxious or you have a craving, just try to observe it for a minute,
Okay.
but without judgment.
Okay.
Just notice the physical sensations, the thoughts, the emotions that are present.
So create that space
Yes.
between yourself and the feeling.
Exactly. You don't have to change anything,
Right.
fix anything, or even make it go away.
Okay.
Just observe it, be curious,
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Just be present with it.
Yeah.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
And that's where the real growth happens.
Okay.
When we lean into that discomfort,
Yeah.
you learn so much about yourself. You develop a greater sense of resilience.
Yeah.
You start to realize that you have more control over your reactions than you think.
I like that a lot. This has been such a good deep dive so far.
It's a good topic.
Yeah, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are.
So make sure you join us for part 2, where we'll continue exploring this fascinating world of mindful acceptance.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
All right, until then, stay curious and keep diving deep.
I like it. So, welcome back to our deep dive into mindful acceptance.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how this approach can help us manage all those intense emotions and cravings.
Right.
But then the article dives into how mindful acceptance can actually help us navigate even deeper, more complex feelings like grief.
Right, and the author's personal experience with grief really brings this to life.
Yeah.
Remember they were talking about how they were visiting their grandfather in the hospital and afterwards just feeling this wave of guilt and sadness.
Right, and instead of trying to suppress those feelings, they just found this quiet place to sit with them.
That's it. Remember that image of sitting on the bench, closing their eyes?
Yeah.
Visualizing those emotions as dark clouds being carried away by the wind.
It's like you're acknowledging the storm is there.
Yeah.
But you don't have to let it consume you.
Exactly. And that's the power of mindful acceptance.
Right.
It's not about pretending those difficult feelings aren't there.
Okay.
It's about creating space for them.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to experience them fully and trusting that they'll eventually pass.
So we've talked about anxiety, cravings, and grief.
We have.
But the article hints that this can be applied to so much more.
You're right. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Think about it. If it can help us manage those really intense emotions,
right,
what other challenges could it help us with?
Well, yeah. I mean, could it help us, be more present in our everyday lives? Or, even improve our relationships? Could it make us more creative?
That's a great question. And there's actually a lot of research now exploring those benefits.
Really?
Of mindfulness and mindful acceptance in different parts of our lives.
Why?
For example, studies have shown that mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep quality,
Oh, okay.
and even boost your immune system.
So it's not just about managing negative emotions. It's about, cultivating a greater sense of awareness.
Yes.
And presence, in every moment.
And that's key. Mindful acceptance isn't just a technique.
Right.
It's more like a way of being.
Okay.
It's about approaching life with curiosity, more openness, and compassion.
And that's a good point, compassion.
Yeah.
Doesn't this also tie into self-compassion?
Absolutely.
Instead of beating ourselves up for those negative thoughts or cravings, we can be more kind and understanding towards ourselves.
Exactly. Self-compassion is essential for mindful acceptance.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that you're human.
Yeah.
You're going to experience a whole range of emotions.
Right.
And it's okay to not be perfect.
Yeah, I think so many of us struggle with that.
It's true.
Especially when we're feeling anxious or stressed.
Right. But with mindful acceptance, we can shift that inner dialogue from self-criticism to self-support.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory.
Yeah.
But what does it look like in practice?
Well, remember that mini experiment we mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah.
That's a great starting point.
Okay.
The next time you feel anxious, stressed, or maybe even just caught up in a craving, try taking a minute to observe those feelings, but do it without judgment.
Okay.
Create that space between yourself and the feeling.
So you don't have to change it, fix it, or even make it go away.
That's right. Just notice it. Be curious about it.
Okay.
And see what happens.
As you practice this, what should we be looking for?
Well, you might start to notice things, like maybe those intense feelings start to soften.
Okay.
Maybe you'll discover that you have more control over your reactions than you thought. And most importantly, you might start to feel more self-aware.
Yeah.
And have more compassion for yourself.
So we're taking back control.
We are.
Instead of letting our emotions run the show.
Exactly. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Right. So mindfulness is like a tool to help us do this.
It is. It helps us build that awareness.
Okay.
And mindful acceptance lets us approach whatever comes up with more of an open heart.
So they work together.
They do. Mindfulness helps us cultivate the awareness. And mindful acceptance allows us to come at things with a more accepting heart.
This is so interesting.
It is.
And I'm feeling really inspired to dive into this more, but it sounds like it takes time.
It does. It takes time and patience to develop this skill.
Okay.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And like any journey, there will be ups and downs,
Yeah.
moments of ease and moments of challenge.
But the key is to approach it all with curiosity and kindness.
Exactly.
And just be open to learning and growing.
That's it. Embrace the whole experience. Just like we embrace all of our emotions.
This deep dive has been great so far.
It has.
And I feel like I'm already starting to see things a bit differently.
That's great.
I imagine there are some misconceptions about all this, though.
There are.
Yeah. Like, what are some of the most common ones you've come across?
I think one of the biggest ones is that mindful acceptance is like giving up.
Oh, yeah.
Or resigning yourself to a situation.
Like you're just passively accepting whatever's happening,
right?
Even if it's something that you want to change.
Exactly. But it's not about passivity at all.
Okay.
It's about empowerment.
Okay.
It's about choosing how you respond.
Rather than just reacting.
Right. Or getting totally swept away by your emotions.
So it's not about just saying, oh, this is how it is.
Right.
It's more like, okay, this is happening, but how can I respond in a way that, feels good to me?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you always have a choice.
Even if it doesn't feel like it.
Even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Right.
And that choice might be to take action to change the situation.
Okay.
Or it might just be to accept what is.
And be okay with it.
Yeah, and find peace within that acceptance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about another one I think I've heard is that it's about, like, suppressing your emotions?
Ah, yes.
Like denying them?
The old just think positive trap?
Right, exactly.
But mindful acceptance is the opposite of that.
Okay.
It's about allowing yourself to fully feel them.
So it's not about pretending that everything's okay when it's not.
No, not at all.
It's about saying, hey, sadness, I see you there.
Yes.
I feel you, but you don't get to run the show.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, good.
It's about recognizing those emotions. They're like waves.
Okay.
They come and go.
Right.
You don't have to resist them or fight them.
Just let them, yeah.
You can just allow them to flow through you, knowing that they will eventually pass.
I feel like we've been so conditioned to think we have to control our emotions, but this is suggesting maybe we just learn to ride the waves.
I love that. That's a great analogy.
Okay, good.
Trying to control our emotions, it can be exhausting.
Right.
It's like trying to hold back the tide.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
And it's really futile.
So we're not trying to be like emotionless robots here.
No, definitely not.
We're just learning to like be better with our emotions.
Yeah, relate to them in a healthier way.
That's what makes this so powerful.
It is.
It's not about denying who we are.
Right.
It's about embracing it.
The full spectrum.
Yeah, all the good and the bad.
Exactly.
Our imperfections.
That's what makes us human.
And that's what makes this deep dive so great.
It is.
It's not just about like, learning a technique. It's about like a new way of being.
A new way to be in the world.
Yeah, and it lets us be more present.
Yeah.
More compassionate.
Absolutely.
And ultimately more free.
I love that. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks.
It's a journey of self-discovery, and it's available to everyone.
This has been such a good conversation.
It has.
Yeah, I feel like I have a whole new perspective now.
That's great to hear.
And I hope our listeners do too.
Me too. And remember, it starts with a single step.
Yeah.
Just a willingness to pause, observe, and choose a more compassionate response.
So if you're ready to take that step, we're here to support you.
We are.
We're going to have more resources and insights in the show notes.
And join the conversation on social media.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
We want to hear about your experiences.
Yeah, and how this is impacting your life.
That would be great.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.